Hey, Bernardo Wealth Extended Family. Crazy couple of days here in the market. We're seeing a positive reaction to the Fed stepping in, backing up Silicon Valley Bank, and markets seeing a good inflation print today. Good being on track with where analysts expected us to be at 6% core inflation. The reason for the video and the talk today is in response to my video yesterday talking about what happened to Silicon Valley Bank. I've gotten a lot of follow-up questions from clients to say, well, what about Schwab? I touched briefly on Schwab yesterday, but I think it's important to understand what ultimately is the safety and security of our assets. What fail-safes do we have in place if, God forbid, this ever happened to Schwab? Now, before I talk about that and specifically kind of the layers and protections we have at the account level at Schwab, there's two things that I want to point out, right? The first thing is that Bernardo Wealth Planning is not captive to Charles Schwab. If you understand our custodial relationship, Bernardo Wealth Planning reports directly to the SEC as a registered investment advisor. We have proactively chosen Schwab to be the custodian for our client assets, right? So there's no relationship between us. We derive no compensation. And the point of that is that we have no contract with Schwab. So if we ever got uncomfortable with Schwab, we very easily can keep Bernardo Wealth Planning rolling and recommend to our clients to say, hey, we think maybe there's a reason we need to move to Fidelity or to Pershing or to some other custodial platform. If there was either a risk with Schwab or if there was a better opportunity out there. I have those conversations on a consistent basis because I am your fiduciary and I'm always looking out to say, one, is Schwab the best place and the safest place for our client assets? And two, does Schwab give great pricing and great access to technology? I believe the answer to that is yes today, but that doesn't mean tomorrow that changes. So we always are looking out for that. As it relates to Schwab and their solvency and their ability to be different in the marketplace, I'm going to give you two stats. It's also in the link that I sent. Collectively, more than 80% of the client cash held at Schwab Bank is insured dollar for dollar by the FDIC, which ranks them in the top 100 U.S. banks, okay? And comparing that to the banks that have been in the news, their ratios are more like between 2 and 20% of their total deposits insured. So Schwab's deposits, 80% of them are insured FDIC, which I think speaks to the conservativity of that bank. They also have an $80 billion borrowing capacity, which is more than the difference of the FDIC insurance. So that other 20% that's not FDIC insured, they have an $80 billion borrowing capacity to make up for that if, God forbid, they should have an issue. They don't have an issue. I don't believe they have an issue, but I'm just giving you these stats so that you can feel comfortable in terms of our relationship with Schwab. So let's talk about now your assets at Schwab to understand if, God forbid, this ever happened, what would things look like? What are our levels of protection? So you have a brokerage account. We have a brokerage account relationship with Schwab. Those assets held, think of them as a bucket that is your bucket of assets. They are not assets of Charles Schwab, right? They are not broker-dealer assets of Charles Schwab. They're not assets that fall on their balance sheet. They simply hold them. They've given a bucket for us to hold our assets in. And those are all segregated by your names, your account types, your account structures. So if something happened to Schwab, those buckets are intact for us to take the bucket and move it to a different custodial platform, kind of like I said, Fidelity, Pershing, somebody else other than Schwab. So it's important to know that our assets aren't mixed up with theirs from a balance sheet perspective. Now let's talk about what's inside of that bucket, okay? In the majority, if not all of our client accounts, we have an element of cash, and that cash has a sweep account to a bank. Okay, so it sits in the brokerage account and automatically sweeps overnight to what we call a sweep account. Then we potentially have a money market, a purchased money market mutual fund. Most of you know SWVXX. That's our preferred one for anything under $1 million. The yield on that right now, the income is just shy of 4.5%. So we're getting a great level of income. That's a security. That's not a cash deposit. I'll come back to that in a second. And then lastly, which makes up the vast majority of our investment accounts, are investments: stocks, bonds, mutual funds, ETFs, real estate holdings, etc., that are held custodial by Schwab. Those are also investments. So if we look at them, let's break them apart and talk about what protections do we have in place. The first one is cash. Your cash sits in the brokerage account and on a nightly basis sweeps to money market. That money market is insured in up to two different banking institutions up to FDIC. So we're actually doubling FDIC. FDIC is $250,000 per account registration type. So let me illustrate that. I'm married. My wife's name is Trinda. So if Trinda and I have a joint account and I have a single name account, she has a single name account, and then let's say I just have an IRA to keep it really simple. Our joint account has $250,000 of coverage because that registration is unique. If we had a second joint account, we wouldn't be doubling our $250,000 of FDIC. It's per registration. Her single name account, $250,000 of FDIC insurance on the cash. My single name account, $250K. Joint, my IRA, $250K. So all those different account registrations also create $250,000 of FDIC insurance on the actual cash deposits. So that's liquid cash sitting in the account. There are a few situations where we run over those limits because we're here to help you invest and do better than cash over time through market cycles. So those limits, we pay attention to them. We try to keep ourselves below them for long-term strategy. So that's the FDIC piece. The next piece underneath of that would be the SWVXX, which is our money market, right? It's a purchased money market. There's two things to keep in mind. The first thing is that inside of that money market, we own, through Schwab, a lot of very short-term, mostly government-backed banking instruments, commercial paper, very short-term T-bills. That entire portfolio's maturity is, I believe, as of yesterday, 24 days. So if there was a run, that whole thing can be unwound to zero inside of 24 days. It's a massive fund. I don't anticipate that ever happening, but that is a ton of protection for us. We don't have FDIC insurance on that. We have SIPC coverage. And I'll talk about SIPC coverage as it relates to that fund. That's a mutual fund structure, plus all the other investments that we have. Other than commodity futures, we don't own any commodity futures. They aren't covered under SIPC. So all of our securities, our ETFs, our stocks, our bonds, our mutual funds, everything, that is first backed up by SIPC. So if something happened to Charles Schwab, Security Investor Protection Corporation, SIPC, if something happened to Charles Schwab, okay, they go insolvent, they go out of business. Again, theoretically, I don't believe any of this is happening. What could we do? One is we'd be able to take those securities because they're in your bucket. They're not in Schwab's corporate bucket. Move them to a different custodian. So that's first and foremost the most likely scenario if, God forbid, that catastrophic situation happened. So we find another custodian, we pick the assets up out of Schwab, we drop them in a new custodian, and we move on our merry way, hopefully unscathed. If for some reason there was a record-keeping issue where my 100 shares of, MGK, Vanguard Mega Cap Growth, there wasn't accounting for the reconciliation or that information got lost, that's where these insurances kick in, because otherwise they'll know about my securities and we'll move them to another platform. SIPC will cover us to that up to $500,000 per account type. Okay, so if we're below that level at the account registration, we're fine. SIPC's all we're going to need. They will restore that accounting. They will make us whole on all those positions. They will not make us whole on market value. That's an important part. So if my portfolio value grows or comes down, they're not insuring market values. They're ensuring that I still have the exact number of shares of all those securities when something went awry. So that's SIPC coverage. Let's say that we have more than $500,000 into an account. Schwab has an arrangement and an excess policy with Lloyd's of London, which is one of the most reputable reinsurance, around the world. So that goes up to $150 million. So I can say this: we don't have any clients over that level at this point in time. Hopefully, we will at some point. But that means that, if that record keeping issue happened, we would be protected by SIPC first, by Lloyd's second, and would be able to work our way through. Um, so again, I don't share this with you to alarm you. I share it with you because I think it's more of what we drive towards every day, which is helping you feel like you can sleep at night in an otherwise volatile situation, whether it's the market moving, whether it's an event like Silicon Valley Bank where people are concerned about just the institutions holding their money. I want you to know that we take this seriously. We pay attention to it at all times, not just when it's in the news. And we're always here to help you understand and have the comfort level that your assets are safe, and that every day we're paying attention to this and trying to guide our way through and come up with ways to just keep ourselves moving and do it in a way that makes total sense, and we keep his risk as low as we possibly can. So I hope this was helpful for you. I attached a couple resources to this email so that you can read the statement from Schwab on how well capitalized they are, and how, this is not an event that, should tie them up. Otherwise, the market tied them up. And then also a little note to specifically talk about FDIC, SIPC, and Lloyd's of London, and why your assets are safe. So again, we appreciate, the confidence that you all have in us, and we're just trying to keep the lines of communication as wide open as possible so that this information helps you to do our ultimate goal, which is sleep comfortably at night and know that, we're here taking care of a lot of this complicated and uncertainty for you. Thanks, and we'll talk to you next time.